thank you so much for being here. I know what it takes to get anywhere in LA for an evening function, so it means a great deal to me to celebrate this with you. It's so funny because these chairs were dropped off like a day ago, and I walked in, I was like, they're white, it looks like a wedding, and because I had ordered brown chairs, and I was like, okay, I won't return them. But then I started to think, actually, this is sort of a wedding. And I'll tell you why. Because I love David Whyte, and David Whyte has this book called The Three Marriages, which maybe some of you know. It's the marriage to your work, the marriage to your loved one, and the marriage to yourself. And you tonight are helping me celebrate a new marriage to my work. And I find myself sort of in the middle of my life slightly turning the ship and wanting to work with poetry, because I think that poetry is a language of becoming. I mean, many of you know me as an astrologer, and I think astrology is a map of becoming, but I think poetry works at us at a cellular level. I think when you can really let it in and breathe it in and let it pierce your heart, it can change things. And I think, so many of us, at least so many of the people that I've spoken to, it's like poetry, they think about high school, they think about junior high when they had to memorize some horrible poem. I mean, I think my poem it wasn't horrible, it was Emily Dickinson. It was something like, a bird came down the walk she did not know I saw, she bit an angleworm in half and ate the fellow raw. And I still remember that. But it means nothing to me. And I think that that's often the case, is that, the poetry that we study in high school, that we study even in college, is intriguing, but it doesn't land. And the poetry that I'm going to share with you tonight there's a simplicity about it. I don't choose any poetry that doesn't make total bodily sense when you hear it. Like, there's nothing convoluted about it. There's nothing difficult or complicated. It's like letting it touch you. Yeah? So, in fact, before I speak any further, I'm going to read you a poem, because that's the way I actually want to start this wedding. No, start this new marriage. And I would invite you, as you listen to this poetry, to just breathe and be in this backyard. I mean, we couldn't actually, you'll hear soon, but we couldn't be in a more sort of Cancerian situation in the backyard of my little home, all cozy. I mean, that's Cancer, right? That's the sign of Cancer. So I would invite you to just breathe with it and let it in, and don't feel the need to applaud. Just keep letting the poetry in throughout the evening. Okay. And this poem I wrote in Ojai a couple of years ago, and many of you know I go to Ojai every couple of months just to have quiet time, just to unplug, and I write and I read and I walk and I cry some more, and then I drink a latte, and then I go to sleep, and then I write, and so that's what I do in Ojai. But this particular time was particularly prolific, and I found myself writing lots of poetry. So this one is called One. One intimate glance can open something long closed within us. One full breath can ease an ancient fear. One tender touch can soothe unspeakable pain. One loving word can soften the armored heart. One radical thought can spark unfathomable daring. One courageous step can change forever the course of a life. And what I've ended up loving about this poem is that it's so simple, it's practical, and it's doable, right? Like, I can have an intimate glance in this moment, and I can stay with it for a moment. And although I have to say, yesterday somebody was looking at me across the room, and I was like trying to keep their eye. I was trying to keep their glance and stay open, and I sucked. But like tonight, what I would wish for you is that you actually have one of these ones one tender touch, one loving word, one courageous step, that maybe one little seed is planted that awakens something within you. Because it's such a practice, isn't it? It's such a practice to not close and to stay as open and evolving as we can. And I think poetry invites us to keep cracking open and keep not numbing and keep staying vulnerable. And speaking of vulnerability, let's talk about why we're actually here tonight, okay? Because just about an hour ago, the planet Jupiter moved into the sign of Cancer. Now, for some of you, that makes a lot of sense, and for some of you, I've just spoken gobbledygook. But the way that I'd like you to, I'm going to talk a little bit about astrology, and I just let it wash over you. Consider it a story. Try it on for the next year to see if it makes any sense to you, because what's happened, Jupiter moving into Cancer, is going to last for this entire year. And we've just left Jupiter in Gemini, so it moved in at 6:40 Pacific time. We just left Jupiter in Gemini, and Jupiter is this planet of beneficence and yes and growth and inclusivity and love. And in fact, my friend Caitlin, who's sitting right there, yesterday sent a picture that was so awesome. It was by this former NASA photographer, and what he did is he took a picture that were with the moon, and then he replaced the moon with all the other planets. So in other words, if Jupiter were as close as the moon, what it would look like. Like, it's amazing. So the picture of Jupiter is particularly amazing because here's the little Earth, and Jupiter is like, as high as the palm tree, and it's gigantic. And so you get this feeling of Jupiter as this gigantic, loving, beneficent energy, and it grows whatever it touches. Okay, and in fact, the beauty of Jupiter in Cancer is it's exalted in Cancer. In other words, it loves to be in Cancer, and it spends 1 year in each sign. So it takes 12 years to go around the chart. It takes 12 years to orbit. So these beautiful cycles of the planets and how they impact us below is this wonderful mystery. So it's been in Gemini, and guess what? Jupiter in Gemini is hyper masculine. It's all about I want to talk to all of you right now, and I need to talk to you, and I need to email you, and I need to tweet you, and I need to, it's non-stop, crazy brilliant, intelligent energy, but it's hyper yang, and it's all about what we have to say to each other. What's our message? I mean, I don't know about the rest of you, but for me, the last year has been a ride, because there's so much information coming at us, and I think it's only going to increase. But I think we have an opportunity in this next year that's quite beautiful, and the opportunity is this Cancerian energy of it's the divine feminine. It's the most beautiful big mama energy, and it's all about family, and it's all about growing our idea of family. And there's a beautiful phrase for Cancer, and it just goes as simply as this: I build a lighted house, and therein dwell. So this whole year for us is about building our lighted houses, little flame at the center of our heart. It's about building our lighted houses, our homes. It's about extending our family so that the light that we create in our family spills outward. Yeah? It's about building a business that we want to hold like a mama bear, like this is my business. It's not just, so often Cancer is looked at as home and family and good meals and all of that, which is so incredibly important. But it's even beyond that. It's I want to fill this university with light. I want to fill this art studio with light. Yeah. In fact, I had a friend who was an artist who had so much strong Cancer energy, and we said, your gallery is your lighted house. We finally came upon that after working together for years, and it's yes, right? So I want to use poetry tonight to flesh out the texture of this time. Now, guess what? Cancer. So by the way, anybody who has strong Cancer in their chart, you may or may not know, but some of you do know, it's going to be an awesome year. That's what I'll just tell you to start out with, right? Yes, it's time, right? Because whenever Jupiter is in your sign, you grow exponentially. And some of it might be a little bit painful, but ultimately you're no, I'm not the person I was. You grow into a new self. So another thing that Jupiter does, however, is that whatever it touches, it grows. So if it touches resentment and woundedness, it'll grow it. If it touches sadness, it'll grow it, right? So that's why it's so important, this idea of building a lighted house, because if we are in a Cancerian way, hidden away, nursing our wounds, isolating ourselves, it's the crab who has the armor, right, and the soft underbelly that's like, don't come near, right? If we're there, then that's what's going to grow. Okay? So what we have to learn with Cancer is a constant risking of vulnerability, which is enormously difficult and not easy to do, and it has to happen one step at a time. So one of the things that I think is going to start happening, and maybe you've already started to feel it, I certainly have, is that you're going to start feeling your feelings more. Like the feeling life is coming up, and you cannot ignore it. You cannot tuck it away, because if you tuck it away with Cancer, it will come and get you. There's huge reactivity. So you can stuff and stuff and stuff and stuff and stuff, and then be like, right? Speaking of which, like my daughter Kate, just a couple days ago, and this is not a proud mama moment, but she said to me, "Mom, how come you're only not grumpy in the middle of the day?" And I have to say, I was like, what? What? I was like, do you mean that? And she was like, well, how come? Oh, but and I will say that I know myself well enough to know that I'm a good mama, and that, that I'm not, some horrible creature that's like, get out of my way, give me a Diet Coke, or whatever it is, I'm like, however, I did take note, because Kate is a sensitive creature. When she was like 3 years old, she would say, "You tired? You hungry? You sad? You sad?" So anyway, I took note, and I noticed that, yes, in fact, one mode that I definitely manage my feeling life. I definitely tuck it away. I definitely wake up in the morning with my to-do list and make it all nice and neat, and everything is managed and everything is controlled. And then when you have little children running around, it's like, how can you possibly manage and control? You can't. So it's constant, like, you're trying to do what you're trying to do, and you're trying to keep it all under wraps, and still you get off track. So what do? I wake up in the morning and I have my to-do list, and I'm miserable. I have my cup of coffee, I feel better. I'm middle of the day, actually it's more like a cup of tea and then a latte, but anyway, middle of the day I'm feeling better, and then at the end of the day I realize what I have not accomplished, and and I go back into. So all this is to say, perhaps you have some resonance with this. All this is to say is we really have to look at how we deal with sadness. We really have to look at how we deal with anger. Otherwise, we're going to have a very reactive year. But I think the potential is to not have a very reactive year. The potential is to open your belly and your chest, and this is all the soft, tender bits, and keep articulating the flow of feeling. And I want to share a couple of poems about this, different approaches to how we can work with this flow of feeling so it doesn't get jammed down, or doesn't get attacked, it doesn't get numbed, it doesn't get controlled. It just flows, because guess what? A feeling lasts about 2 or 3 seconds, right? In the body, that's what it lasts. If you really let it out, it's like, shoom, okay, that's better. I worked out today with my trainer, who I work out with once a week, and I love him, and I didn't expect to tell you this, but I'll tell you this. So I invited him to the talk, and he sort of had a really strange excuse for not coming, and I was, from the beginning, was like, and I was sort of like, I was sort of grumpy about it, and I was like, okay, let's just keep trying not to be grumpy. But I was grumpy about it for an hour. I finally let it go. But in other words, how do we unclench these things? How do we breathe through some of the most difficult circumstances? And we have to treat ourselves with such kindness around it. So, Okay, this poem is called To Begin, and I wrote this poem 12 years ago, and it still has resonance for me, but it's one approach to sadness, okay, and it's one approach. The interesting thing about this poem, we were living in Seattle. Andrew, my husband, was working a ton. I was not working. I was very lost. I was staring out the window, watching buses go by. I was eating and lying on the floor. I don't know what I was doing, but I was not doing what I was supposed to be doing in my life. And I was it was strange. It was a strange time. So this poem actually was the first step out of just being lost in it, because, right, we need the first step out of being totally consumed by the emotional life. Because guess what? Yes, I have anger. Yes, I have sadness, and we all know this, but I'm not those things, right? That's not who I am. That just moves through me. I have thoughts. I'm not those thoughts. Yeah. So I'll just read it. This poem is called To Begin. To begin, I am sad. It is a small sorrow in a great world, but fills this moment entirely. Do not tell a soul. This sadness can be carried quietly. I will cry as I walk to the dry cleaners, carrying my favorite, hopelessly stained dress. I am good at my life, can't you tell? I am pleasant, you are pleased. No one need know I sit stunned on the couch for hours. I want to strip, smear my face, open my mouth, pour sweet wine, too much over my face, my breasts, down my throat. I want to dance for leering men, turn my back, leave them starving. I want to be too much, not enough, never just right. I want to undo any precious piece, unravel my careful life, uproot the lily. I want to break something perfect. I do not wish to sit on the couch, so far away from any life I'm meant to live. I am stuck in sad time, where everything is just out of reach. I'm not blind. Even here there are sweet fields of red blood poppies. Even here there are hot springs bubbling from the earth. I will roll in that blushing quilt, soak in lapping heat. But first, I will stand. I will walk to the dry cleaners, pick up my dress. It will still be stained. I will hold it high so it does not drag on the long walk home. So for me, that poem was an opportunity to actually separate just enough to be conscious of the fact that I was sitting on the couch staring stunned. Do you know that I was just able to take one step back and not be just completely collapsed? And I suppose the greatest gesture in that poem, you can feel, now I read I want to strip and I want to, all these things. That to me, this still may be true, but that to me is like the reactivity that comes from the numbness, that comes from going, I'm not sad, or I'm really, really sad, but this need for I want to break something because it's making me insane, that comes from the numbness, that comes from So I don't want that really either. I don't want to uproot the lily. I don't want to, I don't want that, but that's what needed to come out in order to articulate just how sad I was. So the big gesture that I could take there was lifting my dress so it didn't drag on the long walk home. And that's a gesture. This is one thing, dragging my dress along, and this is another, okay, I'm going to start to pay attention and take that much care of myself. Yeah. So that's the first way to start bringing attention, and even if that's all you can do is articulate, I am so sad, even if that's all you can do and you don't have anything else that you can do to do it, you've named it and it's outside of you. It's inside you too, but it's also outside of you. So Mary Oliver, who I'm sure many of you know, wrote, I mean, these three poems about sadness sort of build one another. And this one breaks my heart, and because it's a whole new relationship to sorrow. And I think she wrote this after her lover of 45 years died. And she wrote a whole a book of poetry called Thirst, where she was reckoning with that. And I think this was one of them. And it's called Love, Sorrow. Love, sorrow. She is yours now, and you must take care of what has been given. Brush her hair, help her into her little coat, hold her hand, especially when crossing a street. For think, what if you should lose her? Then you would be sorrow yourself. Her drawn face, her sleeplessness would be yours. Take care, touch her forehead that she feel herself not so utterly alone. And smile that she does not altogether forget the world before the lesson. Have patience in abundance, and do not ever lie or ever leave her even for a moment by herself, which is to say, possibly again abandoned. She is strange, mute, difficult, sometimes unmanageable, but remember, she is a child, and amazing things can happen. And you may see, as the two of you go walking together in the morning light, how little by little she relaxes. She looks about her. She begins to grow. And I love the image of sadness as a child, right? And sadness is something that you really have to nourish and care for and tend to so that it doesn't consume you. And that's radical self-care. That's huge caring for yourself. That's like you being the kindest parent you can be to yourself, yeah? And I don't know if you do this, but I take walks and I walk along and I'm like, I like that house. I'd like to live in that house. That house is the one that I'd feel, if I were going to move, I'd live in that house, right? So there's something about that, even that's like your lighted house. There's something about she wants to grow and she wants to expand out of this closure, and she wants to move into a house that has more light than the little person. There's something so beautiful about this idea that you can care for her and pay attention to her, but not be her. And if you don't pay attention to her, then you will be sorrow yourself. Yeah? And I forget this all the time, and I think this is what I am. This grayness, this darkness, this is what I am. But no, here she is. Let's walk with her. Let's let her grow. And there's something about this maturing. She'll grow into, we don't know what she'll grow into. If you tend to her, she might grow into the most gorgeous, beautiful beauty, right? Because you've given her the space to do so. So I then, just a week ago, wrote a poem about sadness. And I think that this is one next step. I'm going to move that away a little bit. Is that still okay if I need to have it closer? What?
When you bring your hand to it, it's closer.
Okay. Is it okay now? Okay. So this is called What to Do with Sadness. When sadness lingers, when loneliness creeps in to sit beside you and will not leave, when you can no longer feel a spark of joy in even a hidden corner, find something, anything that is burning. A star, a porch lamp, a candle on a table. Then imagine that light at the center of your heart, and remember, you are molten love. The only thing to do with sadness is to introduce it to indestructible beauty, to the flame of love present in every living thing. Start with a morning glory or a sparrow. Start with the spirited eyes of the woman who serves you coffee. Start with a poem. Say, sadness, meet cherry blossom. Lethargy, meet the Ninth Symphony. Despair, meet the eyes of a child. And then be very, very quiet. Take a few deep breaths and let them converse for a time. So I'm such a fiery being, do you know? I always think of the flame that's alive in each of us. And I do think that this is a very valuable step to how we might work over this year with full feeling, is that when any full feeling is at work, to introduce it to indestructible beauty. Like, what does that mean for you? What is indestructibly beautiful in your life? And to take responsibility to actually sit next to it or listen to it or even just back up against it. So, you know, so that, I mean, what is indestructibly beautiful? And this idea of pace, like let them converse for a time. This was a hard-won lesson for me because I'm an Aries and I'm always like, let's do it now, come on, hurry up. Get better, feel better. And I remember this particular time with my friend Meredith, we were consoling a friend and she was very upset. She was devastated. She was crying and crying and crying. And if you ever want to be consoled, just let Meredith like wrap her body around you and just hold you for hours. Because like this is like the kind of nourishment that does not let go until you have cried the last tear, until you have sort of collapsed and say, okay, I feel better, let's get some ice cream or something. But I was standing there and I was like, after about 15 minutes, like, okay, you know what, you're gonna feel better soon. Let me tell you why you're gonna feel better. Your chart shows that you're gonna be, and I just could not land with her. And Meredith was like, it's not time yet. And at the time I was like, oh, whatever, come on, you know, like, right? But she was right. And there is something about the pace. There is something about taking the time. There is something about letting yourself converse with indestructible beauty. And it might be that first you let yourself converse just by having 2 seconds with a beautiful flower, and then you're like, yeah, well, I'm still sad. But, you know, I mean, but you just keep insisting that you proceed with making yourself available to the immense beauty that's in the world. And it's so easy to hole ourselves up into our little darkly lit houses when we're sad, instead of just going out. I mean, Andrew will kick me out of the house. He'd be like, go take a walk and don't come back for a half an hour, you know, whatever, when I'm really just at wit's end. And I come back and I'm like, oh, everything's good. How are you? Should I make dinner? You know, I mean, because there's something about just being with my own thoughts, my own inner beauty, my own appreciation of what's outside that makes all the difference. Yeah. So sadness meet cherry blossom. Lethargy meet the Ninth Symphony. Despair meet the eyes of a child. When I can just slow myself down enough or even just stay present enough with either of my children, it's like, of course, it's like in a moment, boom. Yeah. And many of you know that. So I also, so what I'd like this little next little chapter is just instances of introducing ourselves to indestructible beauty. So actually, like, okay, if I'm doing it, if I'm bored, what is that going to feel like, right? And I had an experience with my mother. My mother's a very practical woman, but she's also a woman that loves beauty. So her beauty is very practical, you know, and very like, this is beautiful, this will serve you, you know, and I so appreciate her for it. And she and I, this was now, again, this poem is older, but she and I were going to get my older brother. We were going to take him back to my house, I think, for Christmas, and we stopped to pick him up, and he lives by himself, and you'll see what happens. Very simple poem. It's really about what we can also do for one another, how we can introduce one another to indestructible beauty, yeah? And how simple and practical it can be. It's called Christmas. Mom plants a bulb in moist dirt, a gift for my older brother, Brennan. Her hands press the dark earth into the white pot. You can watch it grow each day. Brennan places it on the empty windowsill. Perhaps it will sprout while he is away. He lives alone. We have come to take him home for Christmas. We stay in his spare, clean rooms, only long enough to plant the bulb. Mom brushes the dirt off onto her jeans. She leaves the white hope of amaryllis for her eldest son. And I still think about that. I still think about that moment where it was just like, this, you can converse with this. And I'm going to leave it here and not say a word about it. I'm not going to give you any words I'm not going to speak the words, but there it is. And, there was, my mother also once, her mother was very sick, and all of her sisters, they're all very Germanic, and they all came in and were cleaning the house and cooking and taking care of all those things, and my mom's, that's not her thing. But she wandered out to the mailbox, and on the mailbox was painted this little cardinal, but it had faded. And so she went to the garage, and she found some red paint, and she painted the cardinal for her mom and made it bright again, and felt so good that she gave her gift in her way, because she didn't want to cook a casserole, but she gave what she most felt connected to. And I know her mother, when she was driven by that, was deeply touched, right? And awakened in a different way than any of the traditional nourishing can do, right? So again, this kind of practicality. The ways that we can, also Jules, who made our food tonight, every writing group that we're in, and some of you have been in writing group with me, she would bring like one Oro Blanco, or here's a pomegranate, or here's just like this one piece of fruit, and put it on the table. And it was beautiful, and we would all eat it together. And it was this gesture of beauty that changes the room, that changes the space. Yeah? I have a friend, my dear friend Elizabeth, who some of you know, she sends me cards for everything. She sends me cards for when I talk to her on the phone, I'm feeling tired, she'll send me a card about, it's okay, she'll celebrate everything. She said, once there was a postcard that was sort of like, even big cat, what did she say? Like, big cats after a big leap need a big rest, or something like that. My Leo nature. But, and she loves to find these handmade cards. Nobody sends snail mail anymore, right? Nobody, and it's such a joy to receive it. And it's indestructibly beautiful. Yes, the card can go away, but there's something that's living in it. Yeah. So, a lot of these instances of indestructible beauty for me come through my family, because my family, I'm sort of the serious, dour one. And my family's a little bit, Andrew's always jostling Dylan, my 4-year-old is always jostling me, and this was this wasn't so much that, but you could see the buoyancy in it, and something, oh, yes, my dear, yes, thank you, I agree. When I was pregnant with Dylan, we had 2,000 bees swarm into that tree and just hover and hang there and hover there. And we brought a beekeeper out, and I was all worried. And he was like, they're not going to do anything. And they didn't. They just hung there, and we're all honey and fertile and all of that. Thank you. What kind of bird is it? Does anybody know?
It's beautiful.
We love that. Indestructible beauty. There it is. And that's a conversation too, what you listen to. So I have to tell you the squirrel story. It has nothing to do with anything, but I just have to tell you it because it's such a strange contrast to this, okay? So I've got to tell you, my husband was at the park, lying down doing Feldenkrais, which is this beautiful body work and very still and silent. He was feeling blissed out. The sky was blue. There were squirrels chirping and chasing each other, and suddenly, boom, this squirrel just fell out of the tree 50 feet and landed at, and he was like, great, that seems like a really good omen, It's kind of awful, but you fortunately didn't have to see it complete. Like it was a little hill, and then so anyway, okay. So this next little poem is called "Around the Table," and this again a new poem. It just happened like a couple weeks ago, and we were all gathered around the table. We were not having a very connected dinner time. We were feeling like we should have a connected dinner time, and my husband rallied to try to have a connected dinner time, and it went something like this. My husband wants a family dinner with substance. Let's all go around the table and say 3 things we're thankful for. My son, 4 and buoyant, gets up and marches around the table. Love, he says. Family, he says. Joy, he sits as punctuation. My daughter giggles. Why did you just walk around the table? Daddy said, my son replies. I realize, just as my husband does, we laugh, we can't stop. My son beams. He knows he's done something wonderful. And I am grateful 3 times over for this tiny, shining moment. So sometimes, isn't it gorgeous how, we were like, what is he doing? And isn't it beautiful, like how children hear things sometimes? He's like, around the table, And then yesterday again, just because he now knows it's funny, he was like, summer, and he went around again. But it just, we were just so kind of deliciously stunned by it, and it definitely woke me up out of my kind of end of the day grumpiness, apparently, right? So, and laughter is so key, right? I mean, to remind us of the beauty, to remind us that we're not just curled up we don't have to just stay curled up and closed down. And one of my favorite things to do is I love to go to UCB, Upright Citizen Brigade. I don't go enough, but I love to go and just laugh. Like, great, the improv is amazing, and I just laugh and laugh and laugh and laugh for an hour, and I come out and I laugh and I cry. I always laugh and cry at the same time. I can't help it. Like when I start laughing, then I start to cry. But that's very therapeutic, I think. So the last one of this little particular chapter is very different in tone. Okay, it's kind of a sexy poem, but it doesn't just have to be a sexy poem. I guess this piece of it, the reason why I read this is because sometimes when this feeling, this Jupiter in Cancer, this full feeling is working through, we don't want to manage it, we don't want to control it, we don't want to numb it. Sometimes we just have to trust it and like fall back into it, like some great surrender into full feeling. And this poem on one hand is a poem of love, and on another hand it's a poem of like falling back into something larger than yourself, falling back into something that you don't know, that's part of it. It's the unknown, but that you hope will hold you, and that larger thing starts to open you. And I know that sounds a bit abstract, but there's something about the trust of like taking your sadness, I'm dancing with this bird, and falling backwards. So I'm not going to say any more about it. I'm just going to talk about this as a body opening to light. And by the way, there's a beautiful quote by Rumi that says, "What is the body? That shadow of your love that somehow contains the entire universe." And that's why I'm so much about embodiment, because I also think if we're sad or if we're feeling stuck, one way out is through moving the body, to remember that we're in this body, to remember that the body, if the body can change, we can change. So this is called At Last. He picks me up, my body of angles, to bed, grasps my back, molds it into an arch of yearning. The breath he takes for me reminds me. His hands press into resistance, opening an insistent bud. Each petal he unfolds leaves me more naked. Only his eyes touch my skin. All I know now, mouth on breast, hand on belly, thigh on hip. My body at last. Come in, come in. For me, this is like, it's a lifelong journey of the rigidity in the body that wants to be softened, and trusting that I don't have to control everything, that I don't have to manage everything, trusting that the more that I can surrender, the more beauty will flow through, yeah? And, my body at last, come in, come in. For me, that's love, that's light. Come, and my image for Jupiter in Cancer is like a beautiful, huge lit house, like you see in Architectural Digest, right? And all the windows are lit. And the feeling is, come in to my lighted house. Come in, let me feed you, let me nourish you, let me tend to you, come in. And the only way you can be is come in, is if you're like this, right? And it's like, that's vulnerable, and that's open, and that's breathing, and that's belly soft, and heart available, yeah? So, our final little chapter here has to do with that expansion, taking this Jupiter in Cancer energy that I've been talking about in this indestructible beauty within the family, and you all have your different ways of dancing with indestructible beauty. But then this chapter is about the extension of that. This chapter now is about, how do we get out of our tribal consciousness? Like, this is my family, and this is my family, and this is my family. How do we, and we've had many experiences of this where humanity comes together, right? But another phrase for Cancer is the whole is seen as one. It's one humanity. That's what Cancer ultimately wants. The whole is seen as one. And Kate and I at night, we do a little angel prayer, and the last image that we use is that there are fairies and angels dancing around the earth, holding it and making it a brighter, stronger, more beautiful place to be, and that's very Cancerian. It's like, I will hold and protect, like I will hold and protect Mama Earth, So maybe some of you have heard of Naomi Shihab-Nye. I love her. She's a Palestinian poet. And I think she wrote this poem relatively recently, and I think it went viral. Poems that go viral. I love it. It really, it took off. And this is such a beautiful example of Jupiter in Cancer. This is such a beautiful example of what's possible. And you'll hear it, but it feels like a backyard. It feels like home. And it's far beyond the confines of just one small family. So it's called Shared Words, Shared Worlds. And there's some Arabic in it that I have to say, and I excuse it because I don't know exactly how to say it. After learning my flight was detained 4 hours, I heard the announcement. If anyone in the vicinity of Gate 4A understands any Arabic, please come to the gate immediately. Well, one pauses these days. Gate 4A was my own gate. I went there. An older woman in full traditional Palestinian dress, just like my grandma wore, was crumpled to the floor, wailing loudly. "Help," said the flight service person. "Talk to her. What is her problem? We told her the flight was going to be 4 hours late, and she did this." I put my arm around her and spoke to her haltingly. "Shu dawa shu bidak habibiti tastani stani shwe min fadlik shobit siwi." The minute she heard any word she knew, however poorly used, she stopped crying. She thought our flight had been canceled entirely. She needed to be in El Paso for some major medical treatment the following day. I said, no, we're fine. You'll get there, just late. "Who is picking you up? Let's call him and tell him." We called her son, and I spoke to him in English. I told him I would stay with his mother till we got on the plane and would ride next to her. Southwest. She talked to him. Then we called her other sons just for the fun of it. Then we called my dad, and he and she spoke for a while in Arabic and found out, of course, that they had 10 shared friends. Then I thought, just for the heck of it, why not call some Palestinian poets I know and let them chat with her? This all took up about 2 hours. She was laughing a lot by then, telling about her life, answering questions. She'd pulled a sack of homemade mamoul cookies, little powdered sugar crumbly mounds stuffed with dates and nuts, out of her bag, and was offering them to all the women at the gate. To my amazement, not a single woman declined one. It was like a sacrament. The traveler from Argentina, the traveler from California, the lovely woman from Laredo. We were all covered with the same powdered sugar and smiling. There are no better cookies. And then the airline broke out the free beverages from huge coolers, non-alcoholic, and the 2 little girls for our flight, one African-American, one Mexican-American, ran around serving us all apple juice and lemonade, and they were covered with powdered sugar too. And I noticed my new best friend, by now we were holding hands, had a potted plant poking out of her bag, some medicinal thing with green furry leaves. Such an old country traveling tradition. Always carry a plant, always stay rooted somewhere. And I looked around that gate of late and weary ones and thought, this is the world I want to live in, the shared world. Not a single person in this gate, once the crying of confusion stopped, had seemed apprehensive about any other person. They took the cookies. I wanted to hug all those other women too. This can still happen anywhere. Not everything is lost. Isn't that wonderful? So wonderful. And you know what? Like, this is an airport lounge. You can create an airport lounge wherever you go, you know, and I love that she carries the plant with her, because that's so Cancerian too, because it's her home, it's her lineage, it's her roots, and she carries it with her, and all of the traditions and all the cookies, and then she nourishes. It's so Cancerian. Like, this poem is Cancerian, because then she opens, she creates a family right there. And this is the shared world. And we've all had experiences like this, right? I mean, we have. But it's so magical when you're in the middle of it, because all the boundaries just fall away. And suddenly it's like, yeah, why am I sitting formally and smiling next to a person for 4 hours when my flight's delayed, and maybe saying, yeah, this sucks. Yeah, you know, I mean, why, right? I mean, it's like, there's something so beautiful about what can happen. So, I mean, I would love for you to hold that as an image of what's possible with Jupiter in Cancer. How do you want to build your own house? How do you want to nourish the houses of others? How do you want to introduce indestructible beauty to yourself, to others? And what kind of shared world do you want to live in? And how do you want to stretch the boundaries of family? Yeah. So I have one final poem, and it's a strange poem to leave with, just because it's about fire, and Cancer is water, right? But this is the invitation that I have for you. What are you so ready to, are you ready to thaw? What part of you is ready to thaw? What part of you is ready to not feel so held or rigid? What part of you is ready to flow? What are you ready to put down? Like, there's a delicious opportunity with Jupiter in Cancer to feel nourished. Can you imagine that? To feel deeply nourished, to eat well, to be around people that feed us, to allow a genuine conversation that has to do with feeling. Yeah. So this poem asks you to invite the fire in where you're ready to have something burned away that doesn't serve you anymore. And, this poem came out of a trip to Ojai that I took, again, just very recently, maybe a couple of months ago. And it was a very intentional moment where I just said, I'm here and I want to surrender to something deeper and bigger than me, and I want to live my life with more pleasure, and I want to live my life more available, and this is a line in the sand, and that's it, And I needed to write it to say, this is the line in the sand. And to say, when I get up from here, things are different. And things are different. Sometimes you have to talk to yourself. Yeah? So, just this final poem called Fire Moves Fast Across the Valley. And I'll also just say that I stayed at the Emerald Iguana, which is this beautiful place in Ojai, and there's this new room called the Tree House that is gorgeous, and it feels very romantic. And I was there by myself with my books, but it's so beautiful, and you'll hear that. My room at the inn is for lovers, a bed bigger than a small pond, a tub with clawed feet, a balcony with 2 chairs nestled together. Far from lonely, I am expectant. Late afternoon gusts of wind spill seed pods on my lap. The trees are whispering. They know my silent invitation. My stillness, my quiet breath belie this invocation. But rest is required for surrender to flame. The beauty of the day unbearable. My skin is thinning. Oh, my loves, can I tell you I am curious? Already I am burning. Everything is. The dance around the flame is done. It is time, as there always is a time, as cycles end, as planets move, to stand at the center and burn. And yes, now the wind has left the trees. Do you hear? Fire moves fast across the valley. There is nothing to be lost. Fear devoured, yes. Obstruction turned to ash. And yes, the heat. And yes, the letting go. And yes. And yes. And yes. So it's the invitation of fire so that we can be in the cool, clear, crisp, awakening water, so that we can be in that space of feeling and nourishment for one another. So the very last thing that I want to show you is that a couple of months ago, my family, we were all playing with creating different kinds of mudras. And we were naming them, so beauty or curiosity, or we were just making up strange mudras in a restaurant. And this one was family. So I thank you, my backyard family, for launching this Backyard Illuminations, and I wish you a gorgeous Jupiter in Cancer year. Thank you.